Welcome to the All People podcast, where we talk all people all the time. I'm your host, Elisa Southall. My goal is to improve candidate and employee experiences as well as company cultures throughout U.S. employers. We do this by leading with empathy, diversity, inclusion, equality, teamwork, and transparency. Come on this journey with me. Welcome back to All People Podcast, where we talk all people all the time. I'm your host, Elisa Southall, and I am here today with Matt Wood, who is the founder of Suiting Green Consulting.
Hey, good afternoon, Elisa. Thanks for having me.
No problem, Matt. Thank you for being here. Matt and I connected a while ago, actually. It was probably when we both first started our journeys in our new businesses. And interestingly enough, he used to live in an area closer to me. We didn't know that at the time, but learned that through discovering each other. And we've run in the same circles a lot since then, but I think our conversation was so fruitful that we had to keep it going through LinkedIn and other platforms. So Matt, I want to open it up and just ask you to tell our listeners a little bit more about Suiting Green, what it is and why you founded it.
Sure, absolutely. So Suiting Green is a company I founded. It's now been just over 2 years, but it's really been active over the last year. It is a company designed to help other companies as a consultancy hire better. And in particular, we're focused on companies that want to hire from the military community, whether that's former military professionals or military spouses. We want them to really understand what they're looking for, have a strategic and intentional plan to do that, and then really bring that community into their organization and take advantage of, not in a bad way, but take advantage of the skills and experiences that they bring into their organization to not only help the transitioning service member or the military spouse as they're coming into what may be their first job outside of the military community, but take that company to the next level. So I know it says right behind me, hire smarter. That's kind of what we talk about is, we're not telling companies that they're dumb in the way they're doing it, but when you hire better, you hire smarter. So that's what Suiting Green does. And I just have a lot of fun getting to do that.
And for you, starting Suiting Green was probably a no-brainer with your background, right? I mean, it was probably sort of right in line with what your heart was telling you to do, what your passion was for.
Yeah, absolutely. So for background, I did serve on active duty in the Army for 21 years. I said, okay, I'm done. I'm going to walk away from this. And I figured that was enough fun for one lifetime. And I moved with my family down here to Central Florida. Again, trying to get away from certain things like cold winters. Done with those. And coming down here, I got hired to go work for this really big Mickey Mouse company that's in the area. And I was there for about just over 3 years before they decided that, hey, we haven't opened this land we've got out in California. And so we're going to lay off, almost 30,000 people. I got hit with that layoff. And instead of like, I think a lot of the people that I knew that got hit with it, they were just like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I looked at it as, okay, well, cool. What do I do now? And embrace that challenge and said, okay, well, let's see what's out there. What can I do? And as I was applying to different companies and trying to figure out my next role, I realized that one, there was a knowledge gap. There's 45,000 companies out there in the nonprofit space that are working with the military community to help them transition out. They help them with their resumes. They help them with LinkedIn. They help them to understand what networking really looks like, because those are all things we don't do in the military. And I said, okay, well, I could go that way, but one, I don't want to write resumes. And two, I'd be a drop in the bucket. And as I looked at the other side, I said, okay, well, based on my experience, one, with the first company I was working with, and then two, with all the jobs I was applying for, there was a knowledge gap. Companies didn't know, they didn't know what they didn't know, and they didn't know how to leverage the things that I was bringing to an organization. I realized I'm not the only one that's seeing this problem, that's having these issues. So that's where I was like, okay, like you said, no brainer. Let's find a way to bridge that gap. And Suiting Green was born.
And that's incredible. And I think, Matt, going back to one of our first initial conversations, right? I was pretty transparent with you from a recruiter standpoint. I have never had any experience with the military, right? And so part of it for me was like when I was recruiting, I could get a military resume, person who's been in the service, in that type of service. And I don't know how to translate that to the business world, right? I don't know how to take that role and say, oh, they would be really great at this. And I know you talked about some of those other services that provide sort of to say, here's, let's make your resume say this so that businesses grasp that concept, right? But I think that was a great thing for me to hear you say is like, I didn't understand how to apply those two things. And how do I take this person's experience that I don't know anything about or understand and apply it to a role that I think that they want to be in, right? Before we even had that initial phone conversation. And so, what ways are you helping companies to sort of bridge that gap?
And that's a good question. So it's looking at asking them, well, the first question I always ask them is, because a lot of times they say, oh, we want to hire veterans. My first question is always going to be, what kind of veterans? And I get the deer in the headlights. What do you mean? What kind of veterans? There's more than one kind. Like, yeah, I mean, if that's like me walking into Baskin Robbins and saying, hey, I want a scoop of ice cream. I got 31 flavors to choose from behind the counter. That person behind the counter is gonna be like, what flavor do you want? So I have to make a decision. And that's part of it, is helping companies understand that there's so many different types of people that serve in the military, and different jobs, and different backgrounds, experiences, and even just looking at time and service is a huge difference between somebody that maybe does 3 or 4 years versus somebody that does 15, 20, 30 years. So the scope of responsibility, the levels of responsibility and jobs that they've done over that time frame is huge, and companies don't really understand that. And then the other aspect is they see it and they're like, okay, military service, nothing outside of that. They have no experience outside of that, except maybe before they joined, where maybe they were working at, fast food or something, or in my case, working at a hotel where it was like front desk overnights. I don't have marketable skills, so I thought. But and then they see that they also look at the term veteran, like, okay, well, this is somebody that's broken. Because there's so many of us now that are coming out after 20 years in the war on terror. It's like, oh, they're all broken. They've got PTSD. They got medical issues. It's going to be more of a hassle to hire them. So I take all of that with these companies and I say, okay, well, first of all, broken crayons can still color, which, and they're like, yeah, that's true. And it's trying to get them to change that terminology, take away that term veteran. I mean, it's a great term, and I don't think it's ever going to go away. But if you look at it as former military professionals, somebody whose business skills and experience was learned in the military sector, now it starts the ball rolling, and they start thinking about that differently. Like, okay, so when they talk about having managed projects, they actually have, and it helps open doors and open eyes to say, okay, yes, now these are people that we consider for different roles. But again, it's also coming in and helping, being that Rosetta Stone for them to be able to say, okay, look, if you don't understand this terminology, cool, not a problem. Let me help you with that, and I'll make it a little bit clearer so that it's more civilianese, as opposed to the cornucopia of jargon and acronyms that the government is famous for, that we like to throw all over the place. So it's helping with that aspect too, because they don't know what they don't know, and a lot of times it's easier to just pass on somebody as opposed to taking that chance, and you know one, bolstering their company's bottom line because now they're getting solid employees, but also they're improving their diversity and inclusiveness by hiring from the only underrepresented population that people opt into. And it's like, I mean, you're getting 2 wins right here, and let's keep adding on because there's going to be a lot more that come with it. So it's a lot of showing them that stuff.
That's very interesting. And I like the way that you frame that. I really think that that's important for us to understand. And I know you've used that, broken crayons can still color. I've heard you say that before. And wow, does that really hit home, right? I mean, I think as we start to learn more about empathy and we talk more about vulnerability, right? And it becomes less about this like negative space and more about, using that vulnerability and empathy in a positive way and sort of, leaning on the strengths of those people in other ways, right? I think that that's probably going to be beneficial for the people in the community that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And the companies, helping them understand what they're getting, helping them figure out ways to um, design a military hiring program that actually helps with the transition aspect is a huge piece, because it can be extremely difficult to have gone from an organization or an environment where it's super structured. You know what to wear every day, you're told where to go, where to be, what to do. And I mean, granted, it's not that like regimented all the time, but you're coming out of something that I equate to like Stockholm syndrome, and coming into an environment that you have no real experience with. And I have a friend of mine, Dr. Mariah Thomas, who has been doing some fantastic work to help with the mental and emotional aspect of the transition piece. Um, so there's all kinds of ways that companies can work that, yes, it's going to take some money, it's going to take some time, but it's a strategic plan and a program that will actually benefit them so much down the road. Um, and it's nothing that's going to be a detriment to the organization outside of that initial cost factor of time and money. So yeah, I don't see it as anything but a win-win for organizations to really be focused on hiring a solid community that wants to go out and give back and continue to serve and have that sense of purpose that they've had for so long.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I appreciate that. One of the things I was thinking as you were talking about sort of the skill sets that do translate, right? I worked in manufacturing for a Department of Defense contractor, and I feel like a lot of times the people in at least that sector of manufacturing, they tended to want to hire veterans, right? Because they liked that mindset. They were like, they come in with, that Lean Six Sigma training, the 5S sort of knowledge. They come in with, project and change management. And they come in with all these things that they were like, we don't have to train them. Like they already know how to do this, right? And so they were sort of looking for that, which I think was interesting without even realizing, I think that they were actually doing it, right? But it was easier, I think, to apply in that way. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, in a lot of regards, manufacturing companies really, I mean, any defense contractor knows that they can hire from the military, and they're going to get solid people because of those skill sets. And the service members may not have the prerequisite certifications, but those are easy enough to go get and knock those out. And hey, now they have a piece of paper to back up their skills and experiences. But they understand, those bigger companies like that understand that, hey, we're hiring and we know what we're getting from this, versus other companies that are hesitant to do it because they don't have the experience, they don't know what they're looking at when it comes to the military community as a whole. And that's where they lose out on a lot of talent and opportunity.
Hmm. And then I know, and like I said in our previous conversations, one of the things that you were talking about was not only like hiring the veterans, right, or the military individuals, but how to support them while they're there, right? And we talked about like things like employee resource groups and other ways to support them. I mean, I know you're talking about even from the mental health standpoint, right? But it's not just about hiring them once they're there. It's like every other employee, right? We're providing an experience for them. And is that something you're coaching along the way too, like building effective ERG groups and other things like that?
Oh, absolutely. the ERG groups, those employee resource groups, are fantastic resources for companies just in general. I mean, if you're looking to bring in somebody that fits within any specific ERG, go to the ERG. Ask them questions about, hey, how do you bring in people that are like within your group so that we can bring them in and get them into our organization. And when it comes to the military ones, if you're using folks that either had served in the military, or maybe their military spouse or their military ally because somebody in their family served, they're great resources for an organization to be able to say, let's help me understand what we're looking at when we get these people in for interviews, or can you make sense of some of this experience that they're talking about on their resume that maybe me, if have no experience in the military, I don't understand. So if a company's really focused on having a talent mindset, in my opinion, they need to be leveraging and connecting their ERG folks with their HR and their recruiters and talent acquisition to really make a better seamless process of bringing in the right people, hiring for talent as opposed to just what's on a piece of paper, and then being able to say, okay, yes, they have some of the skill sets, but we can train them to do the other stuff. And especially if we partner them with folks that are in our employee resource groups, now we've got somebody that can help them, that has commonality and can guide them along the way, and show them left and right limits. Say, hey, stay within this. These are things to know, things to be aware of, and it just makes that transition process so much easier and so much better for that new employee as they're coming in.
Yeah, I know when you had mentioned ERG groups, I was like, that's a great way to, as you said, right, even put them on in the interview panel and let them ask some of those more specific questions targeted at like the stuff that's on their resume, and relating it to, right, those other sort of internal functions, right? So I think that's a good thing. And so when you are, and that's probably part of your retaining that military side, right? I mean, because you're not just helping them hire, you're trying to help them retain that long term, right?
Right, absolutely. And I know you talked about it. If you've got engaged employees, you've got retained employees, and it's not hard to do. It's you get them involved in things, and you keep those people engaged, and you show them value, you give them opportunities to upskill, and say, hey, yeah, you're not just going to sit in this one role for the next 20 years, unless that's what you absolutely want to do. But we're going to give you an opportunity to continue to grow within the organization, and that's a huge way to increase that employee retention, which, oh yeah, saves a company money.
Yeah, I know that's a foreign concept, right? Let's actually spend the money to retain them, so it's a return on investment, right? So I know when you filled out your questionnaire, you gave us some interesting facts about yourself on our community spotlight. So I'd love to hear, and it reminds me of your logo a lot too, right? You got somebody in a parachute. So you talked about how you've taken off in more planes than you've landed in. Is that because you've jumped out of a lot of planes?
Yes. Yep, exactly. I did have a portion of my career in the military where I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division. So I did, I wouldn't say jumped out. I more walked out of an airplane in flight. And I've done that more often than I've taken off or landed in airplanes. So it's always interesting. Anytime I flew by myself, I'd strike up a conversation with my seatmate, be like, yeah, man, it'd be nice to land with this airplane. And they, what? No, wait, can I change seats? No. I used to jump out of these for a living. So, yeah, I have taken off in more airplanes than I've landed in, which is fun. I have a good friend who actually, I think he spent more time falling out of airplanes than just about anybody else I can think of, between being a member of the Golden Knights and a free fall instructor. It was like, do you ever stay on the ground for longer than a month? So
And you also told us about your award-winning buffalo chicken macaroni and cheese recipe. So
yes.
where and how did this win an award? And like, how did this come to be?
So I'm a big fan of chicken wings. And I figured, it's a great way to combine two comfort foods, buffalo wings and macaroni and cheese. So it was when I was working for Disney Institute. They did a macaroni and cheese competition, and so a bunch of us got together. We put all our dishes out there, and the one I had was my buffalo chicken mac and cheese. Had some habanero pepper in it, a little jalapeno. Just it, I thought it was just the right amount of spice, and it turned out it's like the best one there. And so I was awarded as the best mac and cheese there. Now I can say that I have award winning food. Um, so I mean, it wasn't a huge competition, but it was enough of a competition that I'm proud to be able to say that I walked away with that. And now I can make that claim that it's award winning.
That's awesome. And I hope our listeners bombard you looking for that recipe because I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who love those two foods together. And so I know when we were, when you started talking a little bit about like there are services out there that do help with sort of resumes and LinkedIn in terms of the military community. I think you and I are both sort of in the same American corporate partners community in some way. Are those companies sort of helping to support the same communities that you are?
Um, some of them, I mean, I
Mm,
know in talking with um, a number of these different companies that are out there that do the transition piece, they're the problem that they run into is finding companies that um, are ready to hire. Um,
mm,
they run into a lot of them that are flying this flag of, hey, we're military friendly, and they send their people over there, the ones that they've worked with. They go to these companies, and next thing you know, within you know 12 to 18 months, those individuals are leaving. They come back to the same transition company that helped them and say, well, I need help. I need to update my resume. I need to move on to this next thing. Why? Well, they didn't really know what to do with it, and uh, that's problematic. It's and unfortunately it happens a lot with a lot of bigger companies where um, and I know some of them within ACP may have this problem where it's, hey, we're going to hire from the military all day long, and great, good on you, but where are those people going? The companies that say, hey, we want to hire 10,000 veterans this year, or we want to hire 10,000 veterans. And period. That's stop. My question to them is, well, within what time frame? Is it a year, 10 years? Are you looking to do this over 20 years? And how many have you hired to this point? And a lot of times those companies don't have the metrics to back it up and say, well, we don't know.
mm.
We're going to make this blanket claim that we want to hire them. So, um, and that's the other aspect to some of the consulting I do is saying, hey, great that you want to make this claim. I appreciate that, but you've got to have a way to track this so that you can say, hey, how many have we hired? Where are we on this goal that we've set? What is the time frame for the goal? And then how many are still with us after a year, after 2 years? Where are they within the company? Are they still in the same roles? Have they moved up at all? Um, and yes, it's more stuff that HR folks are going to have to track to really be to do this effectively. But I think it's important stuff for them. And if companies are making these statements that they want to hire X amount of people, and I don't care what kind of people they're wanting to hire, they could say, hey, we want to hire 300 women. Great. What's your time frame? How many have you hired to this point? How many are still with your company, and where are they at within the company? Don't make these number statements and say we want to hire X amount of whatever without giving it a time frame and without having the metrics to back it up to say, hey, this is how many we hired, where we are towards our goal, how many are still with us after certain time frames.
Mm.
Because otherwise you're flying the flag to say that you're patriotic or whatever, and great. It means absolutely nothing to the people that you're trying to hire versus being what I consider military ready or or just people ready and having that talent mindset and tracking it and understanding where people are. Again, it's a lot of work and it's time and money for the company, but it goes back to the engagement piece. It goes back to your retention piece, and it makes a difference for the company. I equate it kind of to cybersecurity. Nobody wants to pay for cybersecurity stuff until they're hacked or breached. And then it's like, oh, now we got to go pay for all this stuff and it's going to cost us even more. Well, if you did it in the first place, it wouldn't cost you that much. It'd be simple. And it's the same thing when it comes to people. If you invest the time and money at the beginning, it's going to pay itself off over time. And eventually, you're going to make back that investment faster than you think because you're not having the turnover.
So you're complimentary in a good way to them. I know that they're sort of helping people within sort of like the job seekers within that community, right? And you're sort of preparing the companies that they can go to. So it's more like a complementary partnership, which is great. One of the other things that you mentioned was, you know, military individuals getting into these communities and then saying they weren't ready for me, right? And so in that regard, right? I mean, as you were saying, no matter what group of people you're hiring, right? It's about making sure like representation matters, right? Making sure that that's there, but making sure you have a culture that understands like how do we grow these, how do we grow these groups of people, regardless of if they're military or not? How do we grow them and how do we give them support? And so I think that that's also important. Like when you're saying like military ready, right? Like it can't just be like, we're going to hire the military, it's like, okay, but when they get here, like, are you prepared for that? Right. And not that they're not people, but like everybody else in some cases, but like they have different experience. And how are they translating it? And how are you communicating that?
Right. Yeah. A friend of mine had made a comment the other day. We were joking about taglines and said, "Oh, these aren't toy soldiers. These are real people." Um, and I think if companies look at it and they actually make that realization that, hey, yeah, no, these are real people that have feelings, they have emotions, they have things that we have. It makes it a little more real for them when they want to bring them in and make them a part of their organization. And then, like you mentioned, the culture aspect too. The military is a culture all unto itself, but we're constantly moving around, whether it's around the United States or around the world. So we're exposed to so many different cultures that we understand what it means to come into a new culture and we can adjust to the new culture. But if we don't know what that culture is, it makes it a whole lot harder. If there's not somebody there to kind of explain what the culture is, it makes it harder. I mean, yeah, when I moved from New Hampshire to Louisiana for my first duty assignment, it was like, okay, great. I'm going somewhere I've never been in the United States. And I got welcomed there by my sergeant major. Said, hey, and he asked me where I was from. I told him New Hampshire. He said, great, you're the first new blood down here since the Civil War. Like, oh God, what have I gotten myself into? But it was that culture adjustment to realize, okay, this is the way they do things in Louisiana is going to be different than the way they do it in New Hampshire. And as you move around the U.S., you realize, okay, yeah, somebody out in Seattle does something different than they do in Boston or Chicago or Orlando. Um, but then when you go to a foreign country, whether you're going there deployed as part of an organization, a mission, or you're going there to be assigned there for a number of years, you get cultural awareness training prior to going over there. And once you get there, to be able to say, hey, if you're going to Afghanistan, probably not advisable to put your feet up on a desk. They're going to take offense at that. Showing the soles of your feet. So um, get that training. And all it takes is for a company to realize, hey, when we hire somebody, if we don't talk to them as part of the onboarding process about our culture, it's going to be hard for them to really make that adjustment and fit in well until they've been here for a long time, if they make it that far. So working through that as part of the onboarding process, again, goes back to employee engagement, which goes back to retention and saving money. So it's it's that it's that circle of life thing. We want to keep doing that to make these companies better and make it better not only for the company but for the people that they're hiring and bringing on board.
And I love that you're somebody who sees like the retention piece and like the full circle of that. I'm always like trying to explain to leaders, like, I know it costs money. I know HR costs money, but like money is well spent when there's an ROI that you get at the end of it. So it's great that you see that. In terms of military, right? I know one of the communities you were talking about was military spouses, and it's a different, I think, adjustment and different coaching that you might be giving to the employers, right? And I think in my brain, the reason why I want to bring this up is like their resumes could look, as people identify, as like job hoppy because they move, right? But that's not their fault, right? So
Right.
like it, how is that something that you're coaching when you're talking to employers about like that side of the military spouse, or is there another thing that you're sort of sharing?
Oh no, yeah, I mean, that's a huge aspect to it because I mean, my wife will attest to it. She has a 3-year gap on her resume. I mean, we'd have to go back a ways, but she has a 3-year gap on her resume from when we were stationed to Finland. She didn't speak Finnish, so she couldn't go work out on the economy, and there were very few jobs at the embassy for her to be able to do. So she has 3 years where she has no employment history, and a lot of military spouses run into those issues where, they're moving every 24 to 36 months or less, unless they get really lucky and their service member spouse is stationed in one place for 5 or 6 years. And for those people, I really want to meet them because I never had that opportunity. Um, but it's, there's the job gaps, there's the job hopping, there's working jobs below their skill levels, and explaining that, okay, yeah, there's a reason that they may have worked as a cashier at Target while they have a PhD. They were in a place where there may not have been opportunities for them to work and use their education and their skill sets. So yeah, they worked as a cashier somewhere, or they were maybe working fast food and they just did it for a year or less. Um, and there's a reason for that. Or asking interview questions like what's the regular decent good interview questions, or things to avoid, like, hey, what does your spouse do? Who cares? Spouse isn't interviewing for this job. Are you going to hire them too, or is it me that you want working for this job? Looking at, I mean, I know it's getting this weird, you know, change in the work environment where some companies are starting to come back to office spaces, which I don't think is totally necessary for a lot of organizations. But if companies are willing to offer remote positions, the work from home ones, that military spouse community is a huge talent stream to fish from, because now you can have somebody that's doing a job for your company from Korea, from Finland, from wherever. And it doesn't really cost anything else other than the hiring process to get them on board. Um, because there's so many things in place around the country that Department of State, Department of Defense have worked out that I lived in Finland, but my home of record for 21 years was New Hampshire. So every time I had something, well, where are you from? I'm from New Hampshire, but I'm living here. Um, and it maintained that. And my wife kind of came the same way. I mean, she was from Colorado. So yeah, I'm from Colorado. So, I mean, we maintained that for our time in the military. If companies are willing to open up those roles and look at this community as a lot more uh, viable employees, it makes a world of difference. And the other benefit is, hey, guess what? You treat this military spouse really well and you keep them engaged and retain them. Their service member spouse is going to have to get out of the military at some point. Where do you think they're going to go looking for a job? Probably the company that's taken care of their spouse for so long and done so well by them.
Mm.
Wow, now you've got 2 great employees. I mean, hello.
These are rocket science concepts you're talking about here.
I know.
No, and I really loved what you were saying in terms of, that remote side, right? I'm a big proponent of work from anywhere policies, right? There are people that want to go into an office, good on them, right? There are people that want to work hybrid, good on them, right? But leaving it as a work from anywhere policy. So as you were talking about those military spouses and those military families can have the ability to work wherever they are because they still have their quote unquote home address, right? Because they're going to go back home at some point. So you can still pay them as though they're at their home address, but they're just working in Finland or Korea or wherever else. And so they would be sort of narrowing their talent pool by sort of cutting out that population of people. And so I liked that sort of approach because I don't think many people talk about that when they talk from the remote from work conversation.
Yeah, no, I think it's one that they don't factor in. They're like, "Oh, well, I mean, they can work from home, and we're only gonna hire people that are here." And a lot of times it's, "Oh, we're just hiring them in the state that we're located in." Well, that's foolish. Why not hire them from anywhere? If they can do the job, who cares where they're working if this is your company policy? Let them
It's
work
because they don't
from
want to
wherever.
pay the money to set up another payroll code and pay
Yeah,
more unemployment taxes and things like that to other states if they only got one person working. I mean, that's the logistical side of it, but you and I are going retention, engagement, hiring, like we're
yeah,
shouting those words.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, the tax piece can be a hassle for both parties, both sides of it. But I'd rather deal with the tax issue of, all right, trying to figure out where I'm paying, state taxes or whatever, when I know that I've got a solid job that's taking care of. You got me all day long. If you're going to take care of me and keep me engaged and want to keep me around and pay me a decent wage, okay, fine. I will. I'll bite that bullet and suck it up and try to figure out how to do the taxes on my own. Go to an accountant or H&R Block or whatever and figure it out. Not a problem. That's a minor headache.
And so the other thing I was thinking that I wanted to sort of bounce off of you was in terms of individuals who are sort of in the reserves or even the National Guard, right? When we think about that, those are people that I think sometimes employers are apprehensive about hiring because, oh, I'm going to lose them for a period of time to go to, boot camp, or I'm going to, or to go to training, or I'm going to lose them for a period of time when if they get called into the reserve, right? Whatever it is. How are you helping companies sort of navigate people who are sort of still active or on a reserve, but employed in a civilian capacity?
Well, that's a great point because it's an aspect that companies are, like you mentioned, are hesitant to look at because of those concerns where, hey, we may lose this person for, a couple weeks, or we may lose them for 6 to 9 months or something even like that because they have to go away. How do we deal with that? So and obviously helping them understand that there are laws in place that prevent them from saying, oh, well, they left on a deployment, so we're going to cut them loose and fire them. That's great if you want a lawsuit. However, the the benefit to the company though is when these people return from whatever it is they were doing, they're going to have more experience and skill sets than when they left, especially if they go away on a deployment for 6 to 9 months. That's an opportunity for them to do not only the job that the military wants them to do, but learn new ways of doing things so that when they come back, they're able to bring that back into the workplace and make that workplace even stronger. It could be somebody that, they leave as at a certain position or certain rank, and while they're gone, maybe they get promoted and they get put into a new position and they've got new responsibilities. Well, now they've got nothing but hands-on experience figuring out how to do that new role and new responsibilities, and they come back, and all of a sudden the employer's like, well, whoa, wait a minute, where'd you learn these skills? Well, I was just, in Djibouti for 9 months and I was doing all this stuff. And so um, it makes a huge difference for the companies. It's now they're retaining people with additional skills and new skills that are going to benefit the company.
And I also, I mean, you're more of the expert than me, but thinking about the people I've been helping sort of in the military community, I know that there's, so many periods of time where you get sort of rank up, right? You get to take a test and your rank goes up. And it seems like that's pretty frequent that you have the ability to take that test and have that opportunity. And I don't think that the same is true like when we're in corporate, right? You don't have the same sort of growth plan sort of visible to you, one, but also, so easily carved out about like, if I do X, I go here, right? Like it's not as specific. And so when you're coaching companies, are you helping them to sort of have those conversations or to lay that plan out, or even, saying, hey, how are we building a growth plan for these individuals or all of your individuals, right? Because obviously we want some of that too as civilians, but I just think that can be sort of maybe a challenge, right, for those people coming out of the military.
Oh yeah, it's a huge challenge because, like you mentioned, in the military, there's typically a roadmap that says, hey, if you do this, you go to this school, you do this job, you're going to get promoted, and now we're going to give you more responsibility and all the fun that comes with that. And there are a lot of civilian companies that don't have anything like that, or you can come into the company in one area, and the next time you get promoted, you're going to a different area, or you're going to a different area, and then maybe you're coming back to an area. So you're all over the place. But if a company is utilizing, and this is where the employee resource groups can come in, if they're utilizing those ERGs, they can actually help lay out kind of a growth plan for new hires and say, hey, look, here's a typical way to move up, or you know let's look at where you want to go. Let's set a growth plan. Where do you want to be in a year, in 5 years, if you're still with the company? What does that look like for you? And having those conversations, which I think is really important for any organization. You've got to be talking to your people and engaging them and finding out what they want to do. If you're not having those conversations with your people, then you can't help them. You can't help the company, because they're going to hit a point where they're like, well, nobody cares about me. Nobody's talking to me about what's next for me. I don't know where to go. I don't know what my next role looks like, or if I can even apply for that next role. So I'm going to go somewhere else that has the position or job title that I'm looking for. So that's a big thing. That, again, it's time and money, but it's time and money well spent, because it's providing those roadmaps for employees to be able to say, hey, yeah, if I'm doing this, this, and this, my next option for a next position could be A or B or maybe D. And it just depends. But at least I have those plans, and my leadership is working with me to get to one of those three areas. And now I have a goal. I feel valued because they're looking out for me, and I like this company. I think I'm going to stick around. Well, guess what? I've been retained because I've been engaged, and the company saved some money.
Yeah, and
You
I
know,
agree with you, right? It's something that they should be doing with all employees, but I can see that if it's not being done, like it could be that challenge for those military communities. And I even think, and this just maybe my knowledge, but even in the terms of like in the military, you have a ranking, right? And you don't necessarily sort of, I'll say, challenge, right, or that ranking. In a company, right, it's sort of different, because it's not about like, if I want to share a concern or feedback or things like that. It's a different environment where not all companies are accepting of that, but hopefully they are. And so do you feel like that, those military communities or those military individuals sometimes don't necessarily share those ideas in the same way because of that like hierarchy? Or do you feel like that's not always the case?
no, I think that is something that it can take time to break down with those former military professionals, because it's kind of ingrained to us. Hey, you don't jump your chain of command to go, hey, if I've got a great idea, the good idea fairy landed on my shoulder, I'm not going to go straight to the commanding general and be like, hey, sir, I think this would be a great way for my platoon to go do something. I'm going to get kicked out of his office so fast that I won't even know where I was. But that's where I think those ERGs are helpful as well, because they can say, hey, look, we have the company, maybe the company is good about it and has a solid open door policy to be able to say, yeah, you got a way to make us better. By all means, come let us know. We will take that and see how feasible it is and go with it. That's one of the things I try to, when I talk with folks that are making that transition out of the military, is like, look, you have the ability to go to companies and say, hey, I have an idea. I think this may work. I've got a problem that I've identified, but I have 2 or 3 different solutions for that I think can help us be better. Understanding that they can make those approaches to that leadership. It's not quite as forbidden to go way above your chain of command and go talk to somebody. A lot of places are actually more inviting of that, to say, hey, we want to be better. If you've got ideas to make us better, help us out and come talk to us. And I think a lot of places are also have that mindset. Yeah, we've got this great open door, but just like in the military, let your supervisors know, hey, you're coming to talk to us, but this is what you're coming to talk to us about. And as long as you're doing that in any organization, whatever your background is, I think you're covering all your bases, and you're doing the right things by doing that. And the company is open-minded enough. They're like, yeah, cool, we appreciate it. We're going to see how feasible this is and try to make it work. And it may work. And next thing you know, it's like, hey, yeah, this great idea, Lisa. We want to kind of recognize you for that, and maybe we'll promote you too. And oh,
maybe
again,
you'll head up the project, like
yeah,
that's the kind of stuff that, like, I just see it as a way. I know in general, right? Like sometimes people won't go around their sort of, direct supervisor, but I even think cross-functionally, right? Like if I have to go to a leader because I'm on a project and I have this idea, right? Like I can see where that would be a barrier in some cases for military to sort of get through that hurdle and say, like, okay, it's okay to go here because we're doing this cross-functionally or what have you. So I appreciate you sharing that aspect. So that's super exciting. And so when we, if you could give sort of a couple of quick sort of maybe 3 to 5 takeaways to employers about like how they can start, if they're sort of waving that flag of like, we want to be military friendly, right? But maybe they're not military ready and they're thinking maybe we need to call Matt, right? What are a couple of the things that they can do before they call you, right? Do they have to do sort of a deep dive and analysis? Like what do they have to do? Or what steps can they start to take?
my first recommendation is define your why. Why do you want to hire from this community? And once you define that why, pass that down. Let everybody within the organization know, especially your recruiters and your potential hiring managers. This is the reason why we want to hire from this community. Because it doesn't do any good if the CEO says, hey, I want to hire from the military, and doesn't explain why. Because then recruiters are just like, all right, cool. Everybody that's got a military, something in the military on their resume, they're moving on to the next round. Now you may be hiring the wrong people, and now you're wasting time and money. So explain the why, understanding, be intentional about it. And that's why I say, figure out your why behind it before you say, hey, we want to do this. Because otherwise you're not doing anybody any good by doing that. So that's the biggest thing I would say is for companies that want to hire from the military. Why do you want to do it? And define it. The broken crayons can still color. A majority of service members, especially ones that served in the war on terror, are going to have some form of PTSD. PTSD is not limited to the military. It's not limited to combat. It can be anybody. A severe car accident can be traumatic enough to produce those feelings. So understanding that, again, broken crayons can still color. Those are probably the 2 biggest ones. And then again, what kind of veterans do you want?
Yeah, I think that's
Do
great.
you want your chocolate flavor? Do you want your cotton candy ones? You want the rum raisin? What do you want? Let's define those 3 things, and then let's go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good place for people to start even before they call you, right? Because then they can start to share that with you, and that helps give you a better picture, when they're getting on the phone with you. So that's great. Um, so I know that you gave a great quote, talking about failure and not being a period, but being a semicolon, and that they get to finish the sentence. And I really loved that quote because I feel like that's true for just about everything we've been talking about and in life in general. So I appreciate you sharing that. I also, I ask people to share a quote, my guests, because I always end my episode talking about a particular quote by my favorite poet, Maya Angelou. And I do that because I think everybody has a story that can relate to it. And so for me, her particular quote was, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so I ask all my guests if they can just share a time when that might have been true for them, that quote.
It was years and years ago when I was a recruiter in the Army, and this was 2001 to 2004, and I was hard charging infantry. I just left the 82nd Airborne Division. Didn't want to be a recruiter because you know country just got attacked, and all I wanted to do is go fight. But big Army said, "Hey, guess what? No, too bad you're a recruiter. You're out there for 3 years. Suck it up." Okay, fine. Well, I made it a point to look at the people that I was trying to bring into the military as somebody that I would want in my squad, in my unit. And I I had a number of kids because I did my recruiting time in Stafford, Virginia. And a number of those kids that I brought in, when they finished their time, they came back and were like, man, we're so glad that we talked with you, and that you showed us what the benefits were. I mean, I had a kid that came and talked to me. He did the pre-test to, qualify for the military, and said, "No, I want to go in the Air Force." All right, cool. Here's your test scores. Go talk to him. 3 weeks later, I call him up. He hadn't talked to the Air Force recruiter. The guy had ghosted him. Didn't want to talk. Didn't want to touch him. I said, "Well, hey, here's what I can offer you. I can offer you uh, the job of your choice. I can offer you airborne school. I'll get you a $4,000 bonus, and I'll get you 40,000 for college." And his eyes lit up. He's like, "That's awesome. How can we make this happen?" And I got him the job, and I kept in touch with him throughout his time in the Army. He only did 4 years, but he absolutely had a great time. And he came back. This was hands down. I'm so glad you came and you contacted me again and took care of me and helped me get what I wanted, got me to where I wanted to be. And those were the times, as much as I didn't want to be out doing that job, that I was happy with it and I enjoyed it because I was able to take care of these kids and get them things that made their lives better. Um, and and I think I tried to continue to do that throughout the rest of my career. I I still continue to try and do that today with what I'm doing as a company, and then volunteer work and all other aspects of my. If I can make the day better, if I can make somebody's life better in some way, then I feel like I've had a good day.
Yeah. It sounds like that was very rewarding for you, even though you didn't expect it to be.
Yeah, it was. It was that hidden reward that I was, man, I gotta go do this. Oh, well, okay, that's a pretty nice perk right there to have them come back and be like, yeah, I appreciate it. So,
Mm, I can imagine that felt really good for you. Maybe even at the same time was like, maybe I should have just listened to my other people that told me I needed to come here. Maybe that was an intentional thing they wanted you to feel. Um, so where can people find you, right? If people were looking to get in contact with Matt Wood or Student Green Consulting, where can they find you?
I'm all over. I mean, as you mentioned, I'm on social media. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. You can look for me on LinkedIn at Matt-F-Wood. Um, I'm on Twitter. I'm branching into YouTube as Shooting Green Consulting. And then my company website is shootinggreen.com. And that's got the links to all my social media and where I'm at all around the interwebs.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Matt. I really appreciate it. You were a great guest. And as always, Lead with empathy, act with kindness. Have a great day, y'all. Thank you for listening to All People Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. The work doesn't end here. If you want to keep the conversation going, find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or visit my website, apeoplepartnerllc.com. Lead with empathy and act with kindness. Have a great day.